Hello class, in this video we're going to go over how to multiply fractions. Before we go over any of the rules or procedures, I want you to pause this video, write your complete heading in your notebook, including your first and last name, the date, mathematics, your period, and the title Multiplying Fractions. Now that we have that down, multiplying fractions is different than adding or subtracting fractions. When we were adding and subtracting fractions, we had to find equivalent fractions that had the same denominators before we could work with them. But when we're multiplying fractions, we do not have to find equivalent fractions with common denominators. But there is a process that we have to follow, and it's 3 simple procedure steps that we have to do. And we're going to go over those right now. So the very first thing is that we need to change all mixed numbers into improper fractions. So if we have, for example, 2 and 1/2, we have to change that 2 and 1/2 to 5 over 2 before we can multiply. And then step 2, we want to multiply straight across. Picture, for example, that you are in a bowling alley. When you bowl, you're bowling down one lane, not multiple lanes. So we're going straight across. The numerator is one lane, the denominator is another lane, and you just multiply straight across. And then the third and final step would be to simplify your results. I want you to pause this video right now and write these rules down in your notebook. Now that we have these rules down, let's look at an example. For starters, let's do 5/9 times 4/11. So when we're doing this, we want to be able to multiply just straight across. So in a sense, what we're doing is we are going to have in our numerators 5 times 4, because those are our two numerators. We want to multiply straight across, right? And then our denominators are 9 and 11. So we're going to multiply those two. So we have 9 times 11. We skip the first step because neither one of these are mixed numbers, and we just multiply straight across. So 5 times 4 is 20, and 9 times 11 is 99. These were simple multiplications. The bigger multiplications, I would do the work on the side here so that I make sure that it is easy, but these are easy numbers to multiply. And when I look at these numbers, I realize that, hey, there is no way of simplifying this. So this is our final answer. And remember, we only have to simplify if the question tells us to, but we want to keep getting used to doing that. So I want you to pause this video and I want you to write down our question and our work for here in our notebooks. Now that we have that down, let's look at a harder question. So here we have 8 2/5 times 4 1/2. And remember, we type it this way because most computers, unless you have a mathematics app on it, you can't really write fractions. So let's rewrite the question the way that we're comfortable seeing it. And that's 8 2/5 times the 4 1/2. Now that we have that listed out, we can then turn around and do our first rule, make them improper fractions. So remember, to make them improper fractions, we take the denominator, times it by the whole number, and then we add whatever is in our numerator. Our denominator then stays the same. And I'm going to rewrite this the same way over here so that I get used to making fractions, mixed numbers more specifically, into improper fractions. And this is an adding of a 1, and it stays 2. Now that I have this, I can actually do the calculations. 5 times 8 is 40. 40 plus 2 is 42. So I have 42 over 5 times, and then here's 2 times 4 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. So I have 9 over 2. And then I just multiply straight across. So I have 42 times 9 in my numerator, and in my denominator, I have 5 times 2. So I could do this multiplication in my head, but these are larger numbers than what it was in the last question. So I'm going to do my work on the side. So I have 42 times 9. And 9 times 2 is 18. I bring down the 8. I carry the 1. 9 times 4 is 36 plus 1 is 37. So I have 378. So this is really 378 over 5 times 2. That one I don't need to work out. I could just write that here. And 5 times 2 is 10. So I have this now and I want to simplify it. One thing that I noticed right away is that my numerator is way larger than my denominator. And I could simplify by finding a number that I could divide by both since they're both evens. But I like to try to get my whole number out, so I'm working with smaller numbers. So I'm actually on the side here, I'm going to divide. My divisor is the 10, my dividend is 378, sorry. 10 goes into 3 no time, so I'm putting a zero, an X there to hold my place. 3 minus 0 is 3. Then I bring down the 7. 10 goes into 37 3 times. 3 times 10 is 30, so I'm going to minus 30. 37 minus 30 gives me 7. And then I'm going to just bring down the 8. 10 goes into 78 7 times. 7 times 10 is 70, so I'm minusing 70, and I'm left with 8. Now, I'm not going into my denominators or anything, decimals or anything, because I know this is the remainder. That's going to be my numerator. So this is really my whole number, 37, with the remainder of 8 as my numerator. And my denominator here is 10, so that's 10. Now that I have that, I can easily see that 2 goes into both of them. So I'm going to divide both of them by 2. Okay? And when I do that, my whole number stays the same of 37. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Since I can't simplify this anymore, I'm going to circle it because that is my final answer. I want you to pause this video now and write the question plus all of our work in our notebooks for this problem. Now that we have this down, let's do one more problem together because this process is a little bit harder. So here I have 5 and 5/6 times 7 and 2/3. So I'm going to rewrite it the way I like to see it. And that is written where my numerator is on top and my denominator is on the bottom. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the 7 and 2/3. Okay, so now I'm where I'm used to seeing it and I like seeing it. And now I go to our rules. These are mixed numbers. And our first process, our first change, is to change all mixed numbers into improper fractions. Again, we do that by taking our denominator, timesing it by our whole number first, and then we're going to add what's in our numerator. And my denominator stays the same, which is 6. And then over here, I have 3 times 7, which is our denominator, times our whole number, plus what we already have in our numerator, which is 2. And our denominator here stays the same. Now that I have that, I can now multiply and add where I need to multiply. So 6 times 5 is 30, and then 30 plus 5 is 35. So this equals 35 over 6. And here I have 3 times 7 is 21. 21 plus 2 is 23. So this is 23 over 3. Now I just multiply straight across. Okay, so I'm going to do 35 times 23 in my numerator because I want to stay in the same lane, numerator to numerator, denominators to denominators. And then here we have 6 times 3. And again, I can do the bottom pretty easy. We know that 6 times 3 is 18, but 35 times 23 is a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to go to my side space and I'm going to write 35 times 23, and I'm going to multiply it out. 3 times 5 is 15, so I'm going to bring down the 5. and I'm going to carry the 1. 3 times 3 is 9, plus this 1 is 10. Now that the 3 is done, I now need to work with the 2, which is the value of the 20. And instead of multiplying it by 20, I'm going to put my placeholder of my x. So now I could just do 2 times 5, 2 times 3. 2 times 5 is 10, so I'm going to bring down the 0, and I'm going to carry the 1. 2 times 3 is 6, plus this 1 is 7. So I'm going to bring that down. Now that I have nothing else to multiply, I can just add. Remember, this placeholder, this x right here, is very, very important, because if we don't have that, you're going to get 175, which is not the answer. So 5 plus x is 5, 0 plus 0 is 0, and 1 plus 7 is 8. So as you can see, if we didn't have this placeholder, 175 to 805, that is a huge, huge difference, and we don't want to make that mistake. So now I know 35 times 23 is 805. And we know, well, let me make sure that looks more like a 5. And we know 6 times 3 is our 18. Now, this is another large number. And I don't like to work with large numbers like this. I like to make them as small as possible. But I look here and I'm like, all right, I can figure out what I want to divide by. But then I notice my numerator is a 3-digit number while my denominator is a 2-digit number. So I automatically know my numerator is larger than my denominator. So for that, I'm going to divide to see how many whole numbers there are. So I'm going to go to my side space. My divisor of 18, I'm going to put on the outside. My dividends of 805, I'm going to put on the inside. And now I'm going to divide them. So 18 can't go into 8. So I'm going to put my x, my placeholder. And I'm going to minus the 0. And 8 minus 0 is 8. I bring down the 0, and now I got to figure out 80. So I look at this and I go, I can guess and check and things like that on the work. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick a number of 4. I'm just picking a number randomly out of my head. It's not a huge number, right? I know that it's less than 10 if I did 10 because we only want a 1-digit number. And 9 just seems too high, so I want to go smaller. And I feel like 2 is a little too low. So I just guessed 4. When I work out the number, if it seems that I can do something else, I would choose another number to multiply. But I'm just choosing out of my head 4. So 8 times 4 is 32. I'm going to bring down the 2. And I'm going to carry the 3. 4 times 1 is 4, plus the 3 is 7. So I have 72. And if I took 72 out of here, I'm only left with 8. So I know I don't have another one there. So I'm going to put the 4. And I'm going to minus the 72 because 4 times 18 is 72. And as I said, 80 minus 72 is 8. And then I'm going to bring down the 5. Now, I could do guess and check again, but I look here and I have 72. If I take that from 85, I'm only left with 13, so it's not enough of a whole. So again, it's going to be a 4. So 85 minus 72 gives me 13. I would continue into decimals, but I don't really need that here, right? So I know that my whole number is 44. My numerator now is 13 because I pulled out the wholes, and the denominator stays the same. Now looking at it is very clear to see I can't divide either one of these numbers by the same number. So therefore, this is in simplest form. I want you to pause this video now and write down the question and all the work to this question in your notebook. Now that we have some of these questions down and some practice in them, I want you to try it too. So I want you to do 4/9 times 1/3, and that's normally is written as 4/9 times 1/3. And then I also want you to work with the whole numbers. So this is 9 5/8 times the 6 3/5. I want you to write the question, show all of your work in your notebook for these. Again, you may go back to where our rules are. Question number 1, you can refer back to the first question we did. And question 2, you can refer back to this question or even this question in our notebooks to help you figure it out. Remember to write down the question and show all of your work.